Hey guys, in this video we're going to learn how to convert a simple text input into a controlled component in React. Let's look at my setup here. So I have I'm using Create React app here, and I'm using VS Code. And on the right side, I have my display. So in terms of code, as you can see, I'm working with functional components. So I have my app component here, and in it I have my form container. I have my heading here, control text input in React, and then I have a form, and inside the form I have a label of name, and I have my input of type text. So that's right here, and then below that I have my submit button, which is right here. Okay, so currently, as you can see, if I click submit, all I get is the default submit behavior in HTML, which is to refresh the page to try to submit the form. Now, of course, in React, we don't want that. We want to be able to control the input through our state. So let's talk about how we could do that. So first thing we need to do, of course, is to create state. So let's go here. We're going to import our hook, our useState hook, and let's initialize state here. So we're going to say const, and since my input is going to be a name, I'm just call it a name, and set name, and then we're going to say useState, and for now it's just going to be an empty string. All right, so that's done. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to make it so that anytime we make changes to our field, in other words, anytime we type something into our text field, we update our state. So how do we do that? Well, let's go in here where our input is. And normally when we have several attributes for the input, we put them below so it's easier to read. So I'm just gonna do this. And just below the type, I'm going to say onChange. So this is an event listener, and there are several ways we could do this. I'm going to show you both. I'll show you how to do it inline first, which is usually the way I do it, and then I'll show you how to do this using a function, an external function. But let me show you the inline way first. So we can say here event, so we're taking the event, and then we're going to say set name event target value. Okay, so let me actually remove this so we can see better. So what are we saying here? Well, what we're saying here is anytime there's a change in our input field, we want to set whatever is in there to our name state, right? So that's what we're using, our set name, and then we're saying e target value, which represents the value of our input box, because that's the target. All right, so this should now work. So let's just make sure it's working. So what I'm going to do is I'm using Google Chrome, by the way. So I have a little extension for letting me view the state of my components. Okay, so I'm just going to open that, and as you can see, let's see here. Whoa, I have to save this. Let's save that. Okay, so now if I click here, I should be able to see hooks and state. Currently it's an empty string. Okay, and now if I type something in here, I should see the state update here. So there we go. Okay, as you can see, whatever I type is reflected in the state. So that's already working. We did that successfully. Now, as I said earlier, this is the inline way to do it. I'm going to show you another way to do it, which you will sometimes see, which is using a function. So instead of writing this in here, we're just going to refer to a function. We're going to call it handle change. And then here at the top, we can define that function. So we're going to say const handle change, and I'm going to use an arrow function. So Oops. And we're going to take in our event again. And then we're going to say set name. So same thing we had before, right? E target value. Perfect. And just save that. Okay, and now essentially we've done the same thing, just slightly differently, right? So let me open my tools here again and look at the state. Okay, and as we can see, it's still here. So if I type something else, let's say Robert for name, I get Robert in the state. So it's working the exact same way. All right, but we're not quite done yet, because all we've done so far is we're basically able to set our state whenever there's a change in the input, but we also have to make it so that our input value depends on our state. Okay, so that's the second step here. Now I'm going to keep this as a function here, so I'm not going to change that, but I'm going to go below and I'm going to say here value equals name. All right, so now we're getting the value. We're saying that let the value of our input come from our state, which is going to be name. So let's save that. Perfect. And now basically we won't really see any difference, but what's happening now underneath is that anytime we type something in the input, we're setting our state to whatever the input is, and then we're saying that the value of our input should come from the state. So whatever we're setting, we're getting it back as our value. I hope that makes sense. All right, now to complete our form, there's something else we should do. Normally, as you know, you have several fields in the form. I have only one here just to keep things simple, but normally you'd have like maybe, you know, name, maybe email, password, things like that. So what you want to do eventually, you want to have a state for each of these inputs, and then you want to be able to get this information from the state, right? So let's do this example again just for the name input. So what we would do here, we would go to our form element, and here we would say on submit, okay, which is another event listener, and then we're going to set it to a function which we're going to define pretty soon. We're going to say handle submit, which is usually how it's called, but you can call it whatever you like. And then in here we're going to say handle submit. Let's take in the event. Oops. And the first thing we have to do here is we have to prevent the default behavior or form, so the submission behavior. So for that we're going to say e prevent default. Okay, that's the first step. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get the value of our input, right? Which again, now we can get it from the state, right? Because it's the same thing. So I'm going to just say let me do alert, and I'm going to use template literal here. I'm going to say name submitted, and then we're going to give the value of the name. Okay, so let's save that and let's test it out here. So let's put I don't know, let's say Sam for the name. Let's click submit, and as you can see, we get an alert saying name submitted, Sam. Perfect. So that essentially is how you create a controlled component or a controlled input in a form, and then how you basically submit the form and get the value of the input. I hope you found this video useful. Again, I will probably be doing other videos on other types of inputs that are a little bit different than text. For example, something like radio buttons and select element. Those work slightly differently, so keep your eye out for those videos as well if you're interested. Happy coding, and I'll see you in the next video.